This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not dispense medical advice. Always seek the advice of a physician or other qualified health providers if you have any questions regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking such advice because of something you have heard on this podcast. Welcome to a show that we like to call Prostate Cancer Real Talk. Did you know that in the U.S., 1 out of every 8 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer during his lifetime? 1 out of 8. And black men are 50% more likely to develop prostate cancer in their lifetime and twice as likely to die from the disease. But hey, we're not here to quote statistics and tell you how tough prostate cancer can be. Rather, we are here to create a supportive community of survivors. A place where we can discuss the real-life coping methods from the perspective of a married couple who are living through it day by day. Our hosts, Elle and Shay. This is Prostate Cancer Real Talk.
In this episode, we welcome Dr. Donald Vander Griend. Dr. Vander Griend is an associate professor in the Department of Pathology and the associate director for shared resources at the UI Cancer Center. Dr. Vander Griend grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and received his PhD in cancer biology from the University of Chicago and trained as a research fellow at the Johns Hopkins University Departments of Urology and Oncology. His research is focused entirely on prostate cancer and using research and technology to discover new methods to prevent and treat prostate cancer. He is the son and son-in-law of prostate cancer survivors and has seen firsthand how a prostate cancer diagnosis and going through treatment can impact men and their families. Let's welcome Dr. Vander Griend. Ellen Shay, take it away.
Welcome, Dr. Vander Griend. We're so pleased to have you with us today. As we talked a little bit earlier, we're going to refer to you as Dr. V. I think that our audience will find that a little bit more memorable. Shay, welcome to our broadcast today.
Hi, Elle. Thank you.
So, Dr. Vander Griend, Dr. V, we met a couple weeks ago, actually, as I was at the UI Research Center for a photo shoot. And we took a tour of your laboratory. So before we get into the specifics about your work and whatnot, we did hear your introduction, but we'd like to hear from your perspective, your background, your journey, and how you came to specialize in the area of prostate cancer research.
Well, thank you, Ellen and Shay. It's such an honor to be here, and thank you for all the amazing work you're doing with this podcast. I grew up, as it noted, I grew up in actually Grand Rapids, Michigan. I was one of those kids that always asked questions, right? Why, how do we know that? How does this work? I love taking things apart and figuring out how it worked. I could rarely get them back together, but I like taking them apart. And so as I was approaching college and thinking about graduate school, I became passionate about biology and medicine. How can I use science to help people? That was around the era when the Human Genome Project was underway. So we were sequencing the genome and genetics was kind of becoming a big thing. So
talk a little bit more about that project.
Yeah, so the Human Genome Project was, if many recall, I think it was the late 90s, early 2000s it finished. So it finished when I was in graduate school in the early 2000s. And it was really a huge attempt to sequence every nucleotide, every base pair in the human genome. Back then, it was about 10 years and about $3 billion to do that. Interestingly, and I think you and I talked about this when you visited the lab, is we can do that now we can do that in a week for about $1,000. So the price and speed has gone significantly down. So sequencing is becoming a mainstream thing in medicine and health. So yeah, I became passionate about biology and medicine, wanted to apply that towards helping people and making an impact. And so I became really passionate about cancer research and cancer biology. So that's why I decided once I finished my degree in biochemistry, then I did a graduate degree in cancer biology and oncology.
Hey, listeners, metastatic prostate cancer means that the cancer has spread from the prostate to other parts of your body. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with metastatic prostate cancer, consider a Pfizer clinical trial as your next step. To check your eligibility, go to www.mevpro-studies.com. That's MEVPRO studies.com.
Welcome, Dr. V. And we're going to say to the listener, it is V, victory over prostate cancer.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. So, but I find it amazing. And I'm always so intrigued and so happy when we actually have a guest that have a true personal experience with prostate cancer. So I would like for you to talk to me and the listeners a little bit about your personal experience, because we know that your father and your father-in-law both are prostate cancer survivors. So how did that impact your family?
It's a great question. It had a number of impacts, and I'll start by saying, one of my reasons for becoming passionate about prostate cancer, I had actually become passionate about prostate cancer and prostate cancer research before they became diagnosed. And one of the reasons why is I was getting my training in cancer research. You go to family reunions, or you talk to sort of, your parents' friends, and they would come up and they'd start talking to you about their prostates, right? They were so open about it. And I could see in their eyes, they had questions, they had fears. There's a lot they didn't understand. I soon learned I had to become more equipped to talk more about prostate cancer, but also not give medical advice, because I'm not a clinical doctor. I'm a research doctor, right? Mm-hmm. So I know a lot about research, but I can't prescribe anything to patients, or I can't give them medical advice. And so that's what sort of initiated my interest in prostate cancer research, because I saw there was a big need in our society for more research on prostate cancer. My father-in-law was first diagnosed with prostate cancer when I was actually a postdoc. So I was training in Baltimore at the time. I had already had my doctorate degree, and I was training to become a research professor. And so that was kind of scary, right? He knew who to call, fortunately. I think I was blessed to be in the position to be able to help him and connect him with the right people. And so he had a diagnosis when he lived in Chicago. I actually had him come out to Baltimore to talk to other people there. And ultimately, through a collaborative effort, we came up with a good decision-making process and a good set of decisions. I was fortunate to help clarify some things. So he had lots of questions about what's this, what's that. A diagnosis comes with so much information sometimes. It's a little overwhelming.
Yes.
All the terminology, abbreviations, lots. And then you go online and there's so many different options that people have available to them, and big decisions around surgery versus radiation versus active surveillance. So, I had to make sure I was mindful that I wasn't telling him what to do. And I was helping him learn enough about what his diagnosis meant and what his options were, so that he could make an informed decision. And so in the end, he ended up getting surgery. He was happy with that. But also setting expectations around what happens after surgery.
Yes.
Some of that as well, to make sure that he was prepared. He had the family support. His wife was there to support him and make sure she understood, like, here, this is going to be like for a while he recovers from this. And then a few years later, my dad received a diagnosis as well. He lives in Washington State. So he was happy with his healthcare there. Similarly, I could help educate him and give him information on his diagnosis so that he could make an informed decision. He had also struggled a lot with BPH. And so that opted him to...
And BPH is...
Oh, yeah, good. Thank you. So BPH it stands for benign prostatic hyperplasia. It's not cancer, but it's sort of this natural enlarging of the prostate. The prostate, as men age, in most men naturally gets bigger. And that since prostate's below the bladder, the enlarged prostate can actually impede or block the flow of urine out of the bladder. So there's, men get up at night more. If they have bad BPH, they get up more at night. They have to stop more frequently to use the restroom and so on. So because of that, he opted to have surgery as well. He was happy again with his surgery. The outcome was good. And then, the stress and anxiety of PSA testing after that, right? Yeah. So you're going for your PSA test, and there's a lot of stress and anxiety around that. And what does that mean? And if my PSA ticks up, what does that mean, right? Because there's a lot of reasons why PSA could tick up. So it's, I as a researcher was in a position to help explain a lot to him, to the families, and help them understand things. And also point them in the right direction of the literature. Because there's, like Al and Shay, I'm sure you're aware, there's just a lot out there, and not all of it's accurate, and some of it's very accurate, but it's hard to sort of filter through what's right and what's wrong. So they're both cancer-free now. We're very grateful and blessed for that. They were both very vigilant about getting PSA screening, and so their cancers were both caught at a stage where they could get surgery and treatment.
So what would you say their lifestyle is like now? Because a lot of listeners do want to know, what's the lifestyle going to be like, or what, should I expect after or post-surgery or radiation?
That's a good question. I think their lifestyles, I think it was more of an adjustment than they anticipated. And I think some doctors do a good job of setting those expectations. I think most of them do. I think theirs did, but it's still a lot to digest in terms of processing that. I'll say from my own standpoint, I was proud of them for being so open about it, for being with me. A lot of, to talk with my dad and my father-in-law about, well, are you having accidents? How many pads are you going through in a day? And having those more vulnerable conversations with them and saying like, oh, okay, well, if you're having trouble with these things, then you should go to your doctor and talk about them with this.
Right.
Things they can do to help. Because I think a lot of men, and as they've talked too, and they've become more open with their stories, more people have opened up to them to be like, oh, I'm having the same thing. Yes. I didn't know I could do something about that. And I think, so I've actually appreciated that I've gotten, had more vulnerable conversations with them about this, and they've opened up about it, which I really appreciated. But I think they're in a place now where them and their wives are, kind of have an understanding of what to expect. If I think the incontinence was challenging that's challenging for most men as well as them, and so we were talking about sort of how bad is it, what can be done, and so on. So I think the key for them was just opening up and talking to me about it and having that open conversation, which I know sometimes men are hesitant to want to do. Right. But there are things that if they go back to their doctor, there are things that can help.
Exactly.
If they don't ask the questions, then they can't often get the help they need for that.
Just a reminder, to ensure that you stay up to date on the latest episodes from Prostate Cancer Real Talk, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to transition now into the lab work, the research. And I'm going to start out with my personal experience that I had in visiting your lab a couple weeks ago. So the thing that stood out in my mind when I was there was that the scope and size of everything that was going on there. Not only the lab itself, but I'm like, this is a whole building here. Okay, I saw classwork going on. I saw 25, 30 people in a classroom. I saw everybody walking around in a white coat. I was looking for my white coat so I could join in. But it was like a whole building and infrastructure that was dedicated to prostate cancer research. So tell us about your work there, your position. It's you're running the thing, because most people hear about research, but they don't think about the actual mechanism that's going on. So explain to us a little bit more about what you do and what your team does there.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And it was an honor to show you. It was fun. I always enjoy showing people the lab. I really think of the lab as a group of people. It's not really it's a place where we do the research, and we have some really cool equipment and some fun toys, some really high-tech, amazing things, lots of computing nowadays. But I really view the lab as a group, right? We're kind of a beehive where we all have a singular mission of battling prostate cancer. And so the way the lab really runs is I sort of am the principal investigator, they call me, or the PI. I'm kind of the head. But I'm usually not driving the bus. I'm I'm mentoring them, right? So many people in my lab are all different stages of training to be a scientist. So some have a bachelor's degree, they've gotten a biology or science-related degree in college, and they're training to go to grad school, they're training to go to med school, or they just like being in the lab and just, help managing the lab. Others are in graduate school, so they're getting their PhDs or their MDs, and they are getting research experience and training there. So there's classwork, there's work in the lab, and I'm mentoring them and teaching them how to become scientists. And then others in the lab are more senior, where they're have a PhD or an MD, and they're learning how to become independent scientists on their own. So that's really how the lab is structured. There's sort of different levels of training. And then, the more senior people are helping to mentor the younger people. We're really like a team. And you think like our football team, right? Like I'm the head coach, but I have assistant coaches and we have players and staff and so on. So I really enjoy the training and mentoring. And my philosophy is if I'm not going to be the one to cure prostate cancer, then I hopefully can train a generation that will. So education is a big part of science and learning, science and research particularly.
So specifically when we were there again, to show you I was paying attention, we did see a young lady who was looking at a specimen.
Mm-hmm.
And she mentioned, oh my God, it's 17 years old. Okay, this specimen she was looking at. So my question was, why are you looking at a specimen that's 17 years old? And I did ask that question. So I'd like to use that as somewhat of an entry point to specifically what you're doing to analyze prostate cancer itself and the goal of treating it and eliminating it going forward. Get a little bit more granular into that. Sure.
Well, if I can do one thing first, I want to make sure it's clear to your listeners, and I know my father and father-in-law had a similar experiences. When you're in, what are we doing with research and how are we helping people, right? But as you have sometimes you're sitting in a doctor's office and someone walks in and hands you a consent form for research. And you're like, what does this mean? I've got so many things going on. I've got a lot that I'm processing. I don't know if I want to participate in research. What's that about? And how am I protected? How am I kept safe about that? So I first want to make sure I want to be very clear on that because this gets asked a lot. Like, I don't want to be a research specimen. I don't want to be a research subject. And you have that full right and choice to not participate in research. No one's obligating you to do that. But one of the things I want to make sure it's clear is when patients are approached for research, there's a very detailed and intricate process to make sure that is done safely, that the patient is protected, the patient is put first in this process. So it's never going to compromise anything about their treatment. It's never going to compromise anything about their information, right? That's all protected. And so anytime I work with patient specimens, I have to, and this is true for every researcher at every institution, they have to go through a review board. That's doctors, researchers, and community members. They have to do a detailed proposal that says exactly how they're going to do it, what they're going to do with the specimen, how they're going to store the information, and how everyone's trained in the process. And then it goes to this review board. Review board sends it back and says, we want you to clarify these things. We're not going to allow this. We're going to want you to fix this. And then everything is actually reviewed by this review board. It's a back and forth process. So when a patient gets handed that consent, it is been fully reviewed by multiple people in the community and the hospital. It's been approved. It's safe. It's meant to protect the patient, and so that way, when I get things into the lab, I know I'm doing it in a way that protects and makes sure the patient is fully on board with that. Not only that, but every several months they come back and say, "Hey, give us an update. We want to make sure you're still doing it the way we said you should be doing it." So I want to make sure that's clear when we use tissues for research. There's a process, and it's ensured to make sure the patient is protected. When I get samples in the lab, actually, I don't know who they're from. So the key word I use is de-identified. So there's no way I can identify who that specimen is from. But now as I move into what the research I do, we get tissues in the lab. So if a patient consents to participating in research at our institution, usually after they have surgery, a little bit of their prostate then comes into my lab. And it's de-identified. I can never trace it back to who it came from. And then the lab can grow cancer cells out of that. We can grow normal cells from that tissue. And so we have tissues in the lab and cells in the lab that we can actually grow like on a petri dish. And we can do experiments on those. So we can look at how they respond to certain drugs, what genes they express. And so the one that my student Hannah showed you, that was one that it was from a tumor from a patient 17 years ago. We have no idea who the patient is. We'll never be able to know. And it just kept growing. And it was in a lab actually at a different institution, and it just kept growing. And so that researcher characterized it, said, hey, this could be a new useful tool. And so in the community now as scientists, we share those cell lines with each other, and then we can kind of compare notes. So if we do a study in our lab on that cell line, that cell culture, another lab across the world, actually, if they wanted to, could do a similar experiment and replicate our results.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video to keep seeing more content like this from us. It will also benefit YouTube's algorithm, helping to introduce our content to others who may need it most.
So you're getting these cells and cultures from patients, and you're replicating them in a petri dish, and then you're treating them with certain, medications or several different methods to see which method or which medication is most effective.
Correct.
And so that's how new medications are developed. It's by trying their efficacy on, I know words.
Nice.
To trying their efficacy on these cells. Am I correct with that?
Yeah, that's correct. I think there's two ways we think about it. One is, I know you talked to Dr. Razin about her licorice root trial. Right? So there's been some interesting history on licorice root. And so the question is, if we study in a big enough cohort of men, does licorice root have an overall benefit? And so that's an instance where we would get tissues in the lab and can treat them with licorice root to see what it does to a cell or how it impacts the prostate cancer cell. In other instances, we think, there's interesting genes that may be important in regulating prostate cancer that we'd want to design a drug against. Some cases we don't have the drug, but we can figure out if something is worth designing a drug against. So this gene change, for example, this gene changes, it goes way up in prostate cancer, and we really think it's kind of hitting the gas pedal to really push the cancer towards becoming more aggressive. Well, that means that if we design a drug against that gene or that protein, because proteins come from genes, that we can reverse that and turn off the gas pedal. So that's the other way we think about it.
You're doing this work. What are some of the challenges that a prostate cancer or researcher or any researcher, but in this particular case, the prostate cancer research, what are some of the challenges that you face in dealing with the public and perceptions and what have you? What are some of those?
That's a good question. I don't know about you, Al and Shay, but when my father and father-in-law were diagnosed, a lot of people come up to them about, what worked for them, right? So, I had prostate cancer, I slept on the other side of the bed every other night and my prostate cancer went away. So you should do that, right? So you get a lot of that. And as a human being, as a person, I'm happy your prostate cancer is gone because I know there's stress and anxiety around that. But as a scientist, I think, we need to do that at least 1,000 times with 1,000 different people to see if this is true for everyone. And so one of the challenges, I think, in prostate, in research in general, and I often joke in my lab because it's not search, it's research, right? So repetition and replication and reproducibility is a very important component of science. So I think one of the big challenges that we face in the research field is that, if we develop a new drug or a new treatment for prostate cancer, we want to make sure it can impact the most people. And so we often have to have pretty big groups of samples, hundreds, thousands of samples sometimes, to make sure that what we're studying, and if we design a new drug or a new treatment, is it going to help everyone, or is it only going to help a certain percentage of people? And so, we talk a lot about sample sizes, because if we develop a new treatment for, it's 1 out of 8 men, that's a lot of men each year. We want to make sure we can impact as many of them as we can. So I think one of the to answer your question, one of the big challenges is making sure we can get big enough cohorts of participants in our research studies to see if we can, some of these new treatments really have a very broad effect for everyone.
Along those lines, and that's another, we just learned the root of the word research, because it's not search, it's research. So it's a repetitive function. Never thought of it like that before. So thank you for that educational point. We understand that Black men in particular are more susceptible to prostate cancer than others. And I know that you're working to figure that out as well. There is no answer to that. But I want to combine that point with another point that you made, and that is needing large numbers of people. What we want to help do with this podcast is to inform and educate people. And one of the things that we want to address is the fact that there seems to be, or there is, a reluctance among Black men and within the Black community to participate in clinical trials that support the kind of work that you're doing. You did talk about the protective measures that are in place legally, but talk to us a little bit more about why Black men in particular should consider participating in clinical trials if and when they are asked to.
It's a really good question. And it's something I think I'm passionate about, and Dr. Razin and many people are passionate about, because I think it goes back to the sample size number that I had, right? So if we have new therapies or treatments that we want to try for prostate cancer in clinical trials, if I have some interesting targets that I want to design new drugs against, I need a big enough cohort of subset to make sure that, like, if I design this thing or do the clinical trial, that it's going to impact Black men as much as it's going to impact white men. And so if there's not, if there's an insufficient representation in those clinical trials, then some of the data can be a little, I don't want to say, what's the best way? Some of the data can be not fully representative of how the drug's going to impact everyone. And so, that's why I wanted to at least start with some of the research approaches that, you get handed a consent form, and what does this mean, and what are my rights, and what does the law say, and so to make sure that I would be open. I think Natalie would have some good say on this too, in terms of what can we do to help build more trust.
That's a great word, trust.
So that there's more confidence in the research and more trust in the researchers, people like me, to know that it's okay if I participate, and I'm actually doing a service to the prostate cancer patients and researchers to help in the fight against prostate cancer.
And then the other thing I wanted to mention to you, and I did notice that when I was walking around the building, I think you're the first person that I saw that directed me to the correct area, but I had been there for like 10 minutes before I saw you. So I was just wandering around. What I noticed was there seemed to be a pretty good diverse group of people there, culturally diverse. Talk to us about the importance of not only cultural diversity among the cohorts or the people that are being sampled and tested and whatnot, but please talk to us about the importance of diversity among the researchers and the staff and the people themselves, which UI has a great demonstration of diversity. And I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad you noticed that, because it's something I'm proud of as a scientist, is that science is for everyone, right? And we really have a lot of effort and initiatives and celebrate diversity in science. I really appreciate having diversity in science. Good science is about asking the right questions, but also challenging truth. And so I really in my lab like having a lot of diversity, because it allows us to bring in a lot of different perspectives around the same question. And so I think that diversity in science is incredibly important from all levels of both training and leadership. I know UIC has a strong focus on ensuring that and improving that. And I think that's one of the nice things about science in general is it's something we can all come around a common purpose, particularly with cancer. And it doesn't matter, people's history or where they're from, how they identify, or what ethnicity they are or race they are. We can all come around a common problem, and we all have things to bring and contribute to that.
The study medicine in the MEVPRO clinical trials is designed to block the abnormal EZH2 activity in cells. With the study medicine's help, the abnormal EZH2 no longer promotes cell growth, and the flow of traffic returns to its normal state, and tumor growth is delayed or prevented. The goal of the MEVPRO clinical trials is to determine whether this study medicine, taken as tablets by mouth, is safe and effective. During these clinical trials, you will have regular visits to the study site, and your health and cancer will be closely monitored by medical professionals. You may experience side effects from the study medicine, such as diarrhea and fatigue. More information will be provided during the informed consent process.
Please make sure to tune in next week to part 2 with Dr. Donald Vander Griend as we continue our fascinating discussion on clinical trials and research. To find out more information on the guest you just heard or previous guests and a list of Prostate Cancer Real Talk episodes, visit our website, prostatecancerrealtalk.com. And if you have a question, comment, or if you would like to share your story, send Elle and Shay an email, ellandshay@prostatecancerrealtalk.com. That's L-E-L and Shay, S-H-A-Y, @prostatecancerrealtalk.com.